Hello, citizen of the world. Welcome to the European Show, your new one-stop shop for transcontinental politics, society, and the occasional scandal. My name is Dykier-Bela. It's 100 seconds to midnight on the doomsday clock, and this is what happened in Europe this week. The European Summit in Porto, Portugal was the main news in the European Union over the weekend. This is the first time these heads of state got to see each other face to face again, and naturally they were all excited and overjoyed to be able to do this. Apart from Angela Merkel, who was conspicuous by her physical absence. And her excuse was that the German people can't travel, so she's not going to travel. So she kind of dialed in. I don't know. I'm not really mad at her for doing that. It's just one of those. It's one of the social summit is one of those occasions where there's a lot of kind of commitment to social justice being seen to be done, and a lot of kind of interpersonal drama that happens because you get all these people together in one room again, and there's very kind of contrasting opinions circulating from Viktor Orban, the wannabe dictator of Hungary, to someone like Ursula von der Leyen, who just championed a gender equality scandal of her own by kind of participating in Sofagate and putting out this big major message about women's rights and how even she, as the president of the European Commission, is someone who still feels discriminated against by her own colleagues and equals and inferiors. I should say inferiors. That sounds a little patronizing, but maybe we should start to patronize some people. I don't know. You tell me, ladies. So the meeting in Porto, Portugal, it wasn't uneventful though, because I mean it's important because they met after like all this long time. Merkel's not that important to it at the moment, but what's kind of significant is that all the old stuff kind of came up, and it was like nothing. It was like the pandemic wasn't really here. It was kind of surreal because of the social distancing. You have them sitting in these like big chairs, socially distanced, whatever. Like it's all very kind of surreal and unreal in many ways. I think it's Politico who writes about it, that it looked like they were like sitting, like, you know, children in a classroom kind of told where to sit in these like oversized chairs. So that was kind of the unreal part of it. But then, you know, banality strikes, the banality of evil. Turns out everyone's exactly the same way that they used to be. The same problems keep coming up and we're not fixing them. And the same kinds of checkmate in terms of social progress and social literacy are still a big problem. And the main thing that's kind of showing itself again is the issue of gender equality. Viktor Orban, I don't know, like I'm almost thinking he said this stuff just to like make everyone feel like we're back to normal, like, you know, like some kind of a normality and continuity with his like insane ideology that he propagates. But so Hungary's Orban did a little spiel on how he's not happy with gender equality because gender equality is against Christian Hungarian values, and gender implies some kind of a quote-unquote ideology, and there's only two genders. At least in Hungary there's only two genders. Just a heads up, you know, in case you're going to Hungary. In Hungary, there's only two genders, so there can't be gender equality because there's only two, so it's better to say equality between men and women, and that's literally what he said. He said he's not comfortable discussing issues of gender equality because the way that he wants it articulated, particularly in any points and commitments in the declaration that was being kind of constructed in this summit, he wanted that to say, instead of whenever it says gender equality, it should say equality between men and women, because only men and women exist, right? So that was his spiel. It's obviously awful, and I don't mean to make light of it, because people in Hungary and other Visegrad countries in the European Union are currently struggling, and they're going through hell, and they're being oppressed and discriminated against in very real ways. I mean, they're being attacked. They're the victims of violence. But at the same time, it's just like this broken record. It's like incredible how a man like Orban has made like a career for like, this is decades now. We're talking about decades of the same kind of, that's all he ever has to say. And it's this kind of constant like bait and switch, like not even bait and switch, but it's just this like illusionist strategy on the part of a lot of these kind of wannabe dictatorships in Central Europe right now, where, you know, there's a lot of like Christian fundamentalism, just like Hungary is just like Poland, just like Czech Republic, where there's been like this whole controversy between these countries, these Visegrad countries, and Western Europe in terms of things like migration, in terms of things like women's rights, LGBTQ plus rights. This is like a constant thing, and it's this like ongoing debate, and eventually it's going to have to terminate. This debate is eventually going to have to attain some kind of a conclusion, you know. We can't keep on going around in circles with this. We can't have mad Viktor Orban, who, I mean, this man is kind of insane. He really is. The kinds of like things they say, or the president of Poland, Duda, also completely insane. Everything he has to say about gender equality, LGBTQA plus rights in terms of women, it's insanity. They're like, they're just like propping themselves on this really ancient. It's like a return to the Middle Ages, and even like before the Middle Ages. It's like this return. They have this like narrative of a return to Christian values, as though there's like participating in some kind of a crusade. It's like, I don't know, like it's George W. Bush on his way to Iraq. It's kind of, but the problem with like Europe and these countries is that they're not, this is not like a one-off. This is not like something that happened and now like it's being resolved. This is like a constant narrative wherever like any summit, any meeting, any opportunity, mad Viktor Orban has something to say about gender. He's like really preoccupied with gender, gender matters, I guess. He is troubled in the gender areas, and so is President Duda of Poland and many others. It almost makes me think that they're working something through, you know, like these people so anti-LGBTQ plus rights, so anti-women, anti-abortion, anti-equality, and so like obsessed with gender. Like Orban brings it up any chance, and he's like supposed to be opposed to it. Surely, if you are opposed to something, this should not be something that you bring up all the time constantly to like rehash it. You would like try and just like forget about it, right? But not Orban. Obviously, it's like, obviously, in a very kind of brutal political way, this is just a way to keep his people who had a very hard time of the economy in the 2000s, and then after the financial crash, Hungary really suffered financially. So the whole like Christian ideology spiel kind of started coming up at that time. So that's obviously the reason why. And in Poland, there's other reasons, because economically, Poland was doing really well. The kind of Christian crusading narratives are kind of part of a church lobby. Like it's a bizarre story, but that's truly what it like. One of the reasons that people like President Duda keep like bringing this up is because they're basically in the pay and power of the Polish Catholic Church, which has become like this sectarian offshoot of the Vatican. They're not, I don't think they even consider themselves part of the Vatican anymore. And this is all happening in actual, like, those are countries within the European Union, have been part of the European Union for decades now. This is not, this is not a clash of like post-communist and Western civilization. This is just people coming up with ways to be problematic and coming up with ways to govern their states in a way that does a lot of propaganda and brainwashing. But on another level, I always wonder, I really do, why they choose this, like why this particular thing. And it just makes me think that someone like Orban or someone like Duda, like, are you really questioning your gender so much? Like, is this why? It seems so personal to these people, and it really is very personal. And I just feel like maybe someone should help them. I'm not a practicing psychotherapist or psychoanalyst, but there's plenty of people who are, and I'm sure someone eventually will help them. There's some great psychoanalysis out there. Who knows what someone like Orban might eventually discover. So anyway, so he brought it up, and they did change it a little bit. This is always like the European Union compromise in negotiations over things that aren't really going to be put into place anyway is always amazes me. It's the power of bureaucracy. It's this potent aroma of things that will never happen. Okay, so there is a part of the Porto Declaration where they're talking about gender equality, and it should have read gender equality. Orban wanted it to be changed. He wanted it to say men and women. And the final version says the gender gap. So now it's about the gender gap. I don't know how they persuaded him to think that somehow putting the word gap in there is gonna like somehow make it okay for them to say gender, since he's objecting to the word gender, because his whole propaganda in Hungary is that gender is an ideology, like it's some kind of a I don't know, cultural Marxist conspiracy that's trying to destroy the fair maidens of Hungary or something. I don't know. So Orban got what he didn't want, but somehow was okay with it. And that's pretty much part of what happened in the summit. On a serious note, there were people protesting in the streets while this was happening. And they were protesting the really true and very real situation that they're experiencing, that we're all experiencing right now. The frustration of the people outside on the streets when this was happening in Porto, was about job loss. It was about lack of opportunity. It was about the horrible situation that working people have found themselves in, with no real help and no real true security from the powers that be. And I know that the European Union is probably one of the better places to find oneself in this situation, but a lot of people fall by through the cracks, and a lot of people just don't get the help, and a lot of the types of help that there's available out there is just simply not adequate. And this is years of neoliberal rule, and just like very kind of unreflective neoliberal, unquestioning neoliberal machinery in the European Union. And that's what's happening. It's always these contrasts, isn't it? So, yeah, while Orban was having an argument and a kind of confessional situation about his gender, there were people protesting the reality of the situation, which is what's going to happen to us, and what's going to happen to jobs, and what's going to happen to our safety. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, President Macron did something that I really enjoyed. Not because I agree with him, but because I think it's hilarious. And he did a bit of armchair psychoanalysis himself, being French. France being the degenerate center of psychoanalysis and other dangerous things. Now, I just love this. Okay, so Macron did this, like, press conference, I guess it was a press conference. He spoke to the press, right? And he basically said that he doesn't like the fact that all these journalists are asking him questions and asking other people, other European Union members and officials, that the European press is asking them questions about the patent waiver and why there's no support for the patent waiver in the same way that there is from the Biden side, which is obviously a moral disaster for the European Union. Why, for example, Angela Merkel is opposing the patent waiver on COVID-19 vaccines, right? So that's obviously like something pertinent to the press and journalism situation in Europe right now. And Macron gave this like speech to the press about how he's sick and tired of hearing these questions and hearing about Biden and them bigging up Biden and hearing about how amazing Biden is. I'm serious. And why don't the press in the European Union, why don't the press support the European Union more? And why don't they big up the good things that we do here in Europe, like the Green New Deal, not New Deal, but like the Green Deal, which is very powerful legislation to do with the environment, absolutely at the forefront. Macron is correct. Why don't they cover all the stuff they do to transition society into artificial intelligence territory? Why don't they cover all the successes of the European Union? Why don't they talk about how amazing people in the European Union are? Why do they have to criticize and criticize and criticize? And why is Biden so nice? And why is Macron so bad in their eyes? And he doesn't like it, but this is not the end of it. And then he went on to say that is because he had a theory about it, right? He had a psychoanalytic theory about it, and he said, well, I clearly believe, it is clear to me, okay, myself as President Macron, that you, the journalists, have some kind of a complex, like in your head, like a complex. And I can't help you. Like, he actually said this. He said, I can't help you because I don't have a complex. So I don't know how to help you. But you need to, like, help yourselves. You need some kind of a therapy or psychoanalysis because you have a complex. I love how, like, I love everything about this speech. I'm really warming to Macron a little bit in terms of, like, the way that he conducts himself. Obviously not on political things, but overall. This is just so funny. Yeah, so the psychological complex that he's talking about, I don't know what the symptoms are necessarily or the diagnosis, but I guess he means that there's some kind of a psychological complex going on with these journalists and Biden. Maybe it's some kind of a repressed desire or sexual desire for Biden. I don't know. I don't know exactly what's going on there. Some kind of transference. But I love the fact that he said, well, I can't help you because I don't have this illness, so I don't know how to help you. That's actually, to be fair to Macron, like, that's actually a really progressive and critically minded and woke way to approach mental health. A lot of people, kind of critically minded people in mental health research and practice would agree with Macron that you can't really speak on something in mental health unless you're kind of speaking situated as someone who's experienced these situations. So I don't know, maybe he's reading some critical psychiatry, who knows, but it's just hilarious. So but again, like, this kind of thing only happens in Europe. This is like something that only a European president would say, and probably only a French president would ever say. that you have like some kind of a complex. But oh, it's just like so great. I love it. Because he wasn't like, it wasn't like heavy-handed, like, you know, like Trump would have said, like, and I don't want to like even say the name, I don't want to go back to that like mental time, but you know, like Trump would have been like, you know, whatever, like he could barely string 3 words together, right? And it would have been something like about like something being rigged or crooked and like, oh, it's not fair. But Macron made it about a psychological complex and, you know, oh, I'm reading you. This is psychoanalysis. Sophistication. Amazing. Thank you. Yes. Obviously, the journalists are asking these questions not because they have a complex or a desire to somehow be in love with Biden, but because it's a good freaking question. And it's an embarrassment, really, to the European Union to be behind the President of the United States, the same guy who is behind the Obama administration, who have a terrible human rights track record. And this still is not enough to stop Biden from doing somewhat of a right thing. At least he's like, at least in like through symbolic practice, just like signing off on this waiver. That's the right thing to do. But not in Europe. No. Angela needs to think it over. She doesn't think it's a good idea. She doesn't think it's practical. This is why people are questioning it. They're not being unfair to the European Union. I disagree with that. On this one issue, I think we do need to critique this situation because just in terms of optics too, it just makes Europe look kind of barbaric. However, at the same time, I do kind of agree with Macron overall. Like, I think like what he said, and like he said it like in anger and stuff. Like it was just so passionate. It was just incredible. It was an incredible performance, political performance. I do kind of agree with him though, because I think a lot of the time the European press, because it's like this complicated machine, right? You have like the French press, the German, like all these different countries together, the Polish, the Hungarian, crazy Orban, you know, there's censorship in some places, effectively censorship. There's like animosity in different places. Then you have like kind of more internationally, transnationally minded European outlets. You have Euronews, which is like one big one, France 24, a variety of different kind of news spaces situated in different types of kind of consciousnesses and countries. And a lot of the time, a lot of it is kind of negative about, like, I agree with him. A lot of it is incredibly negative and even at times unnecessarily so. When, for example, the British press, which is total propaganda, is always positive about being British. It's always like somebody else who's the problem, usually the European Union and whatever the European Union did that day. But within the European Union, there's this like kind of constant like self-examination and kind of it's like this weird period, I feel, in social narratives and social discourse where we're transitioning like generationally, I think, into more and more of a federalist European consciousness. But a lot of the people who are in charge of the mainstream media don't have that kind of spirit to them, that kind of rationale. So they're still kind of in this counter-European, almost again, let's diagnose each other today, in this almost unconscious way. They're kind of sabotaging themselves even, or being oppositional to certain European things because, well, that's just good journalism, right? Being oppositional to whatever is happening, being self-critical. But a lot of it just tends to be, whether it's Germany, whether it's France, a lot of it can be kind of contentious and kind of us against them. And then the European Union is just this beautiful, easy kind of other, you know? Like this this monolith somewhere out there, like this symbol of everything that might be wrong with whatever is going on in the world and in domestic politics on that day. So I kind of feel like I feel what he's trying to say. I understand this frustration, and I agree that, for example, when the Green Deal was struck in the European Union, Biden called this big conference 2 weeks ago. The European Union had a rush meeting. They managed to finalize and legalize the Green Deal before they went to see all these different heads of state and talk about their environmental commitment. This was the best organized, the most actually productive and proactive effort to save the environment. It was, and yeah, it's not ideal. It's never going to be ideal, and certainly never going to be ideal in the way that the state of Europe functions today. But at least it was an effort, and it was quite a good effort. And all they got was a bunch of flack, and I agree with that. They got a lot of critique. Immediately, people were like, immediately the commentary was, but is it like, what is it gonna, like, is it really gonna be effective? Oh, I guess it's like, I guess it's illegal now, but like but is it really gonna happen? How are they gonna do it? Is it implementable? Blah, 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 blah. Have some self-respect and some pride in some of the things that the European Union has done. Yeah, it's not ideal. It's still the best we have, and they did as good a job as they possibly could at that particular moment. And I think they represented the European Union really well, and their commitment was much superior to anything else out there. And this is not a new project. This is not for show. We know it's not for show. The Green Deal, that's been in the making for years, and it's like a real, actual thing in Europe. Whereas whatever Biden comes up with, whatever the United Kingdom come up with, certain other places, a lot of these are kind of transient plans that will never really be addressed because, for example, someone like Boris Johnson, he'll be out in 2 years and he's just going to steal whatever he can in the United Kingdom and not come back. Like, he doesn't care about the environment. He's not bound to anything. But the European Union is. And I agree with President Macron. We should be a little bit more proudful of that. I don't know what the word is, but yeah, fewer complexes, and so on and so forth. A bunch of other things came up that I kind of agree with him on. I don't agree with him, however, on this patent waiver. I think they deserve all the flack that they get. And yeah, so the big news this week is that President Macron is now a psychoanalyst. And he's been having like a weird time too. I really have to say, I'm really beginning to feel like a lot of empathy for him. Macron is also like a fan of Albert Camus, who is also one of my favorite writers and philosophers, someone I discovered probably just like Macron when I was kind of questioning preteen. And Camus is someone who's known for his kind of existential theory of the absurd. He's known for The Stranger. He's known for things like that, and he tends to attract a kind of teenage boy audience that might gravitate towards people like Sartre when they're teenagers, and everyone's an existentialist. But actually, Albert Camus was also a very important philosopher to the European project and the European Union, and he wrote about this at length. He spoke about this at length. He had a very unique and interesting view on it, a view that I totally agree with. He was a kind of a third way kind of a man, a non-card carrying Marxist, and a man of controversy until today, because he evades being in a particular community. He has like that famous Camusian third way. Neither revolutionary Marxism nor liberal kind of, liberal capitalism. But that's another story. So I really appreciate Albert Camus, and I really appreciate that Macron appreciates Camus. But another thing that's been happening for Macron is Napoleon. This is like, you can't make it up. You cannot make this up. This is becoming the psychoanalysis news of the day in European psychodrama. So what's happening in Europe is the 5th of May was 200 years since the death of Napoleon. Tough. Napoleon's an important person to the European Union, mainly because he was kind of like the proto-European Unionist, in the sense that he tried to invade everyone and make everything France. But, okay. It's a different time. Napoleon is definitely not the kind of, in my mind, as negative a figure as some other people in military history. Probably not someone that I kind of follow and adore. But I'm not sure that he's as controversial as he's become recently. But yeah, no doubt under Napoleon we had colonialism and slavery, including the events in Haiti, for example, where there was a lot of unrest and finally an overthrow of the French legions. But there was there's a controversy in France when they were celebrating the 200 years of Napoleon's death on May 5th. Like this old debate, kind of like, it's not old, but it's kind of like from last year. The whole like statue debate came up for Macron, and he had to address it in a way that was like kind of middle of the way. France did not allow its statues to go down because the French love their tradition, and the French love a good statue. Once you build a good statue, why would you want to get rid of it, right? Like, the pigeons know where it is. Everyone's used to it. You don't want to confuse anyone. So I'm guessing for the sake of the pigeons, they want to keep the statues where they're at. And Macron kind of addressed that for Napoleon's for this like celebration of Napoleon, and he kind of was like, I don't know, he's kind of right. He was like, he said like, you know, we acknowledge that there is like greatness and inspiration in much of French history, and that someone like Napoleon, I think he called him like an inspiration and also the demon of Europe or something like that. There was like, he was, you know, an angel and a demon or something like that, along those lines. And I would agree with that. I think there is something to judging history and people in history by the standard of their times, not to the extent, however, that we need to necessarily keep on celebrating them. So in terms of the Napoleon thing, I agree with that. However, I don't think that Macron is correct in kind of saying that and then saying, well, for that reason, we need to keep all the statues of all the other slave owners and psychopaths. No. I'm really surprised that the statue thing became such an issue in Europe, too, last summer. Because Europe, of all places, knows something about statues being torn down. Like, look at East Berlin. Look at communism. My entire childhood, there were statues going down, you know? And they were going down for good reason, for the reason of kind of like psychogeography, and for the reason of social justice, and for the reason that you just didn't want to have the old dictators ruining your view. That's kind of like, you know, if you want to build a new vision of the world, you probably want to get rid of the dictators. And I think, I'm not saying like tear down every single statue of Napoleon. I think there's like contextually, I think someone like Napoleon is a little bit more complicated than some other figures. I think contextually he belongs in some places and not in others. But I think in general, I don't understand this reluctance on the part of people like Macron even. Like, I know that, like, you want to have, like, the tradition, you want to be, like, you want to have that boomer tradition preserved or whatever. But it's really not that hard to imagine that you can preserve a kind of narrative of pride for the French people and still kind of honor the fact that we don't want that to be in our present. It's really not that hard. And I'll tell you another thing why I have this like kind conflicted situation with Napoleon. And some of my woke friends might not, like this if they're watching. But, and I'm for, there's, statues that went down in London last summer that I'm, good riddance, throw them in the river. The more the merrier, to be honest. But I'm kind of, biased a little bit with Napoleon. Because Napoleon, yes, slave owner, someone who participated in slavery at that particular time, in colonialism. But he also liberated a lot of people who were oppressed, and he gave opportunity to people who had been colonized by others. Not out of the goodness of his heart, let's not be crazy here. Obviously for strategic political reasons, but nevertheless, there are places in Europe where people might have a soft spot for Napoleon. For me, the story of Napoleon is a very personal story. My grandfather worshipped Napoleon, not in a super way, but he was interested in history, and he followed Napoleon. I think that was his favorite time in history. And the reason for that partly was because my grandfather was descended from a dude who came to what was then, I think, wasn't Poland at the time, but then became Poland under Napoleon, or at least the free city that my grandfather was from. That whole region, Napoleon kind of liberated that region on his way to Russia with his legion. And one of these soldiers was my great-great-great-great-grandfather. And then he just settled there in that region. And then obviously Napoleon didn't have a lot of luck in Russia. And then one thing led to another, and this liberated area of people who had previously been colonized by the Russian, Prussian Empire, various different forces, went back to being colonized by these powers. But for that brief period of several years, Napoleon brought freedom and hope to these people. And that's kind of part of my actual family heritage, and definitely something that I feel connects me very strongly to my grandfather. And it's kind of the story of Europe, isn't it? This constant kind of to and fro of power, of despair and hope, and like Macron says, of angels and demons. At the same time, if it's hurting people and offending people, then just throw them in the river. I'm not, you know what I mean? I understand, I appreciate Macron's, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I see the Macron side of this. I see the sentimentality. I see the subtle movement of European history. And I see why to some people, for example, there's a statue of Napoleon in various places in Poland. I can't remember exactly. There's one in Warsaw. He started he really did a lot of things in specifically the land that is now Poland, and would have been Poland then, but under oppression from the Tsar and the Prussian Empire. And the memory of this has been retained, and the memory is really positive. And if someone asks, I don't know what it's like now, but I'm sure that if you ask that someone my grandma or even older generation, if you ask them, what do you think of Napoleon? In that region, they would be we love him. Everyone loves him. Napoleon is a really, he is a much loved and very positive figure in that place, for sure. So I can see the logic of having the statue of Napoleon in that place, in Warsaw specifically, to say thanks, Napoleon, for liberating us from a bad situation for a little bit, until you realize that Russia is real cold and intense, and then it didn't work out, but no hard feelings. Sorry, your dad, all of that kind of stuff. I see that being I can see that being a thing, or maybe even some kind of an ironic statue. But at the same time, because of the violence, this is true war. the fact that he's like loved in that region doesn't mean that he loved the region or he cared about anything other than his like crazy ego, homicidal kind of personality complex. So yeah, so like I have empathy for these arguments in terms of like certain historical figures, and I see why it wouldn't be completely inappropriate to have Napoleon stand in some of these spaces. I think there's spaces where he's totally not appropriate, but if there's enough people who don't like him, then let's just get rid of him. That's my view on it. And yeah, Macron's just having like a hard time. He's having to deal with Napoleon, all this like the ghosts of the past coming back. He had like all kinds of weird things. There was a coup like an attempted coup in France via a letter from several generals about the dangers of Islamism in France. Another Christian crusade. It's like that history, like, it just spins, it's like the circular motion with history in Europe sometimes, I feel. It's just like, things don't end, and like, whatever drama was started, you know, back in 1325 between, like, some guy in France and some other guy, like, is still, like, people are really, like, still invested in this. And it's kind of ridiculous, but at the same time, it does have consequences because young people growing up in France experience a lot of discrimination and a lot of racism unnecessarily. And we need to change those narratives. We need to change the way we talk about these things, and we need to change the way we deal with them. Okay, the United Kingdom. Oh, this is a terrible story. The United Kingdom has started detaining European Union nationals. This is just a quick, like, apropos, but it's pretty bad. The United Kingdom is now detaining European Union nationals in detention centers if they don't have the appropriate migration documentation, and this goes for everyone. Because now you can't enter this country if you're a European citizen. You can't just come here like people are used to. I think if it's like a tourist thing, you can for up to X amount of days. But if the officials, like, for some reason believe or decide to like accuse you of this, if they decide to say, well, we think you're here for work, and you can't like prove you're not because like you can't prove disprove a negative. They'll just put you in the detention center and send you back to wherever. And that's happened to several people from various countries. We're looking at Italy, I think Spain, several other nationals have been deported in this way. But first they put them in this deportation center, and it can last a week to get back home. Obviously, this is a scandal. This should not be happening. Boris Johnson totally dismissed it, did not give comment. But a lot of European politicians are pissed. So we'll see what happens with that. But like the fact that they're doing this is just ridiculous. A quick update on the United Kingdom and the Scotland situation, as well as the Keir Starmer situation. So we had the super election recently. As predicted, Scotland did get their majority for SNP. This is not a super majority, so Sturgeon will depend on more than SNP in the Scottish Parliament to get her majority to push through what she needs to push through, but she'll push it through. This is now officially the mandate that Scotland needed. My prediction is Scotland will be independent. This is something that's like in the air in Scotland, and it's always been there, and all it needed was like some kind of a prod, and definitely Brexit was that prod. I hear a lot of commentary saying that people of Scotland don't want like another referendum, that they're tired because of COVID. All this commentary is coming from pro-English circles. This is not what I'm getting from the people of Scotland at all. And that should be a pretty quick process. And probably, realistically, once Scotland's done it in 2023, started that process, probably by 2030, England will also be coming back together with Wales, I hope, in Northern Ireland. So yeah, congratulations to Nicola Sturgeon. Let's see what happens with that. Keir Starmer did not resign, sadly. I want him to resign. I want him to resign, and I want him to resign and like give us. This is my fantasy today. Let's talk about my psychoanalysis today. I have this fantasy of Keir Starmer doing this like Macron style speech, and he goes, "Oh, you know, citizens of England, I have failed you. Citizens of the United Kingdom, I have failed you all. I have a complex. Please let me go. We were wrong. Let's bring back Jeremy Corbyn because he knows how to do the job. I give up. I resign. Thank you. Goodbye." But he's not going to do it. He did not resign himself, but he did resign and reshuffle his shadow cabinet. That's like the most he was able to do. This is pointless. It's useless. Like, Labour is lost. Like, their entire messaging is so, like, faceless, pointless, baseless. It's so in the middle. And the move that Starmer is making is not towards the left like he should, but towards the right again. They're just never going to learn. Okay. Oh yes, and I just wanted to personally inform my audience, and that is yourself, that Count Binface, who I discussed in my last video, Count Binface was a hopeful for Mayor of London in the election for mayor. Sadly, he, I don't know what happened. It must have been rigged, really. Count Binface was definitely a favorite candidate from my side. I have no words. He did not get it. He didn't win. It's definitely rigged. Fakeness all around. There will be some kind of an inquiry if I can help it. So sadly, Count Binface will not be the mayor of London. It will be Sadiq Khan. Again, better than like a raging Tory, but a very centrist Labour mayor. So no surprises there, no changes there, no revolution. Same old, same old. Final quick story. I love this story. Okay. Romania. This is, again, why I love Europe. There's so much like historical, weird, like psychoanalytical historical material today to discuss. Little situation in Romania. You know, like in any country, slight reluctance about the vaccines. People are not sure. Economy is lagging a little bit because of the pandemic. So, what we have is a special unit for vaccinations in Dracula's castle. I'm not kidding, in Romania. And they're making like a whole thing of it. Like, it's a trip. You get like a free pass for the castle for 100 years if you get your vaccine there. And you get like a tour of Dracula's castle. And of course, like the little puncture marks as though it's, you know, part of the tradition. And it's like a little trip for the family, and I absolutely love it. I think Dracula would be very pleased and touched. In fact, I think we should make Dracula like a little mascot for 2021 for the hope and the tradition that is like I don't even know what, like European medical solidarity and medical medieval imagination. Anyway, I feel like Dracula is the mascot of 2021. What with the vaccines coming up, I love the Romanian people for doing this. Whoever first came up with this idea is a genius. And that is the show. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. This is all super new. So I would love it if you could comment, interact, subscribe, the usual, you know the drill. Hate watch it, me, listen, hate listen, whatever you gotta do, you gotta do. I appreciate it. You're like my patience zero, numero uno, the in crowd, you know? So take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time. And stay European, because European is a state of mind. Bye.